Histograms are a specific type of graph that group, like groups of data. They show a graph that has the groups instead of individual pieces of data. So if you're looking for an overall um, dividing a whole thing into groups, a histogram might be the perfect graph for it. If you're looking for individual, trying to compare each instance, then histograms don't work that well for that. They really look like bar graphs when you get done with them, but they don't graph that individual data. They graph data in groups instead. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and make one here. All right, I suppose we went through and talked to a bunch of people that lived in the nursing home and went down like a specific wing. So this wouldn't be all of the people that lived in the nursing home. This would just be like a certain area. I did age groups, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and hundreds. As I talked to them, this is just pretending I didn't do this, but if I was to, I went through and talked to them and had a sheet and just asked if they were in their 60s or 70s or 80s or 90s or their hundreds. These tally marks would be each person that I talked to. As you can see, there are 3 people that I talked to that were in their 60s, 5 people here that were in their 70s, 9 people that were in their 80s, 4 people that were in their 90s, and 2 people that were in their hundreds. All right, so this frequency area of the table then would be for how many times that happened. So I had a 3 here, a 5 here, a 9, a 4, and a 2. Now again, if I was going to have a cumulative frequency graph, there would be one more column right here. And it would just keep track of how many people I've talked to so far. So this would be cumulative frequency. I would have 3 so far, then another 5, so that's 8 so far, then another 9, so that'd be 17 so far, then another 4, so that'd be 21, and then another 2, so that would be 23. So that's, I would have spoken to 23 people in the nursing home. That's just a little review on the cumulative frequency. So I'll erase that portion there. All right, so if we're going to do this, then we go through and tell what we're going to graph. So I've got a spot for a title up here. I would say ages of nursing home residents. All right, now I look at my groups. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups. So as I look at the columns that I have here, I have 1 column, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If I was to use a column per age group, then I would have this entire side over here that didn't have any information in it at all. We don't want to waste all that space if we've got it. So I would use 2 columns here for each age group. So these 2 columns right here are going to be for the 60s. I can actually just put that down here right now. This is for 60s. These 2 columns right here are going to be for the 70s. These 2 columns right here will be for the 80s. These 2 columns right here would be for the 90s. And these would be for the hundreds. Now these numbers down here again are our age groups. So I would write the words age groups below there. All right, now I'd like to go through and talk about how high these are going to get. The very highest one I need to get to is 9. So if I was to count by 2s, I'd get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. All of my information will be graphed below here. The highest I would get right there, and there would be all this empty space up here. So I don't want to count by 2s this time. Might work just fine for another graph, but this histogram will be best if I was to count by ones. If I count by ones, I'm going to end up getting all the way up to 10 up here. And again, my highest amount is 9. So I'll be up into this area and only a small amount of wasted space up at the top. All right, so as I look at the 60s, then I have to get up to 3. That's this line right here. So both of these columns end up making this bar for the 60s. The 70s have to get up to 5, so I would go all the way up. See how I just started right at the edge of this bar and just continued? So the bars are actually touching one another. And then the 80s, I would start at that edge, go all the way up to 9, and be both of those bars, both of those columns. The 90s would start right at the edge of this one and continue and take up these two columns. And then 2 for the hundreds. I'd start right at the edge of there and go. So we've got a histogram that shows, again, you're not going to find out how old this particular person is right here. This person is in their 60s, and we don't know if they're 60 or 61 years old or 66 years old. We just know that they're in their 60s. So you're not going to find the individual people's data in this case, but it does do a nice job of graphing all of the groups of data. And that's what a histogram does the best. Okay, just a reminder quick before we go, this axis that I just shaded in, that's called the x-axis. And this axis that goes up and down, this is called the y-axis. All right, so I hope that helps with histograms.